Hello, welcome. If you're here backstage, we've got a couple of people watching. We're just going to let everyone come on, and we have Oliver Chilton joining us in just a second as well. So welcome everyone to our Black Tot Rum 50th anniversary preview session. Tonight I'm going to be discussing our new release with our head blender, Mr. Oliver Chilton, who we will get into the room right now.
Oh, there you go.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
I'm all right, although I'm realizing that I've been doing this a lot with my hair, and it just looks all fluffy.
I hear your fan club says that your fluffy hair is one of their key things that they look out for in these videos. So
is that right? The fact that it gets more fluffy as the tasting goes on.
Yeah, it's a good sign. Like, my hair gets drunker the more I drink throughout the night and gradually becomes crazier. So you can always sort of get a gauge of where I'm at. But welcome everyone. If you're joining us now, I can see a few of you there backstage. Feel free to drop any comments in and questions as we go throughout the session. So just to introduce myself, my name is Mitch Wilson. I'm the global ambassador for Black Tot Rum, and tonight I'm joined by Oliver Chilton, our head blender for Elixir Distillers. And we're actually, if you're wondering where I am, this is a sort of whiskey haven, a whiskey and rum haven now. And this is your private tasting room, Ollie, which I know
that's my office. So what are you doing in it? I don't remember okaying this. Don't touch anything.
Just gradually working my way through these rum samples I'm finding on the desks.
just don't open the bottom cupboard on the left. You don't need to look in there. It's not for you.
Oh, I'll be right back. So for anyone joining us, we are going to be talking tonight about the Black Tot 50th anniversary release, which is not out yet, but will be coming out early November time. So today is a bit of a preview tasting for you. We're going to cover any questions that you might have, and we are going to drink some as well, because we like to tease you and frustrate you out there. Ollie, I've got loads of questions for you, and today we're going to be really looking at it from, a lot of people in the whiskey world obviously know you for your blends that you've done, and your bottlings that you've done through Elements of Islay, Single Malts of Scotland and Port of Skeg, and Black Tot is sort of the new kid on the block, I guess, in the Elixir Distillers lineup. So I'm interested now, and for other people out there as well, what was your origin? What was your background with blending? How did you first get into the game?
Oh, I don't think I've got, sadly, a dramatic backstory. I would love one where, I was rescued by dogs and brought up by a famous blender in their back room and then secretly let out on the world. But I'm afraid it's not quite as fancy as that.
That's what I've heard about you. So that's I'm going to scrub that off.
Debunking stuff. That's what we're doing. Debunking. Yeah. I was not Mowgli from Jungle Book. I worked in we'll call them specialist spirit shops, essentially whiskey shops to start with. So I worked in retail, selling bottles of whiskey, and I got a job in retail very simply because it was cheaper to work in a shop and drink whiskey there than buy it. And I was a student, so I learned to get free booze if I worked in a booze shop, and I did that for a very long time, and eventually, through various means, I ended up working for Sukhinder Singh at the Whisky Exchange for a very good friend of mine, Alex Huskinson. And I got to know Sukhinder. We got drinking together. We liked very similar things. It's not hard to like similar things with Sukhinder, because he liked very nice, expensive things. And I couldn't drink those things, so he was my gateway, my access. In terms of blending, the first time I ever got involved in any kind of blending was actually when I got married. I was very good friends with a few of the guys at Compass Box, which is a fantastic company. If you've got some time while you're here, go and check out Compass Box. They make wonderful things. And like a lot of people in whiskey, certainly whiskey retail in the UK and all over the world, actually, John Glazer has an amazing ability to bring you into his world. And when I got engaged, I actually lived about 10 minutes from their office, give or take.
Right.
And I went and did a training there for work, where they invited my now wife, as well as everyone else from the Whisky Exchange, because that's the kind of company they were. And Greg Glass, who became a really good friend, is a really good friend today. We were chatting at the end, and I said, is it easy to make a whiskey for my wedding? And he went, yeah, okay. So I at the time, I was the smallest ever blend created by Compass Box, 10 liters of blend, which I still have some bottles of. And the process used to be, Greg used to work 24/7, so he was in the office every day of the week, and I basically popped down and see him on the weekends, and he'd drop samples in my letterbox. And I learned an awful lot from that experience of working with Greg and then John. But at the time, I was doing cask selections, and my day-to-day job was buying casks of whiskey for Whisky Exchange. I used to go out and from Signatory and other distillers, which is an easy job, right? You try something, you say, I like that, and then you buy it. It's really easy. It's great. It's actually the easiest and best job in the world. But through that whole Compass Box experience, Sukhinder and I started chatting about some of the other labels we had, such as Port Escape, and he brought me over to that side to do originally Elements of Isla, where we were blending together kind of 4 or 5 casks at a time, and then Port Escape, where it was like 15 to 20 casks. All pretty small scale, and it's still, it's a relatively small scale thing. You're trying individual casks and you're putting them together in a format that you like. With Black Tot, that was kind of my first experience of blending in some ways to an ideal flavor profile. Although it was very Elixir Distillers in our process. We wrote down a brief and then ignored it, and made what we wanted, which was always good fun. But it was the first time that I really thought about flavor rather than, no, I like that. And if I had, in whiskey terms, I'd always worked in that, I like that, or if I add that to it, I like it a bit more. It's a bit like making food, right? So when I cook a lot at home. I'm always adding a little bit more of this and a shake of that and a bit of that. And I treated whiskey the same way. With rum and the whole nature of Black Tot Finest Caribbean, it was very much treated more from what do we need to make? What are we aiming to make? And we wrote down the style, we wrote down what we thought we'd try and do. And then we used experience through drinking copious amounts of different rums to try and figure out how we would do that. In the end, I ended up doing a lot more of this kind of stuff, which I believe is where all blenders end up from the best. So yeah, that is my horribly long origin story. Sorry, Mitch, a lot of questions. We'll go through these questions.
No, it's great. No, it's good. I think this is part of it. It's always interesting to hear how people got to where they are. And so you mentioned obviously when you started coming onto Black Tot Rum and what. Obviously, with your years of sort of cask selections and blending the various whiskies that you've done, you had tremendous experience in that. But when you started blending rum, how was it different? What challenges did you maybe have with rum that you hadn't encountered with whiskey? What were the differences there?
Okay, so the first challenge was really simple. I love whiskey. I enjoy rum, but I love whiskey. I believe in it. I believe very strongly, and I'm a deeply religious man with no God. Right? I'm a deeply religious man who believes that whiskey is the be all and end all, and I am unapologetic in that. And because of that, I'm quite obsessive over the category, which means has led me to having a reasonable amount of knowledge. I wouldn't say I know everything by any stretch. I'm not saying I'm an expert because there's still so much to learn, but my understanding of bottled product, from my background in shops, gives me a perspective that helps with what I do. And I didn't have that perspective in rum. I enjoyed rum. Rum was fun, right? And I think you mentioned we've spoken about this a lot of time. Rum is fun, right? It's a fun drink, but I didn't take it seriously. And the problem when you get to putting something together is you don't understand all of the parts. And I like to understand all the little parts that go together. Trying to learn that quickly is tough. And I'm still a long way from understanding it. I'm a long way from feeling comfortable with it. Which I had to work from a purely flavour basis. It's a very different. And the other thing is just the market's so different. In whiskey, we largely deal in stock we've held a little while, and then stock I'm purchasing and laying down for years. So it's stock management, it's cask management. Rum, you largely deal with essentially one or two companies to buy bulk stock, and they're flavour-led companies. They're completely flavour-led in terms of their business model, in terms of how they talk. That was a real eye-opener when you're essentially not going, oh well, I want to have, like in whiskey, you'd say something like, I want Kalila, I want it in refill wood, and I want it at 7 years old, and what it be like, and if I age it for 2 years next, it'll do this. Right? And I understood that. In rum, I wasn't. You can turn up and say, okay, I want Hamden, and they're like, okay, great. What? What ester levels? What? I mean, it's so the complexity is massive, and undescribed largely. It's not written about in enough detail almost anywhere. It's not explained. But Scotch whisky is so regulated, and it's so explained. It's so well educated as a category. It makes it easier to understand for customers and also for people learning that category. Rum is so diverse, so many regulations, it's much more complicated to learn. It's much more time consuming to learn. And frankly, it's full of people who are talking shit.
Surely not. I would never do the rum.
To think you're drinking one thing and end up drinking something else. Which meant that when we came to blending for Finest Caribbean, it was purely sensory, which in some ways is quite freeing. It's quite nice. I learned a great deal from Carsten from Skier, who basically runs that company, that the biggest brokers of rum in the world.
Yeah, fantastic, isn't he?
And he's a genius when it comes to that. Yeah. Genius, proper genius. I think I screwed with his mind in a way that few people have, mainly because unlike most people who he gives a sample to or 3 samples and they say, oh, I want B, I would 3 samples and put them back together and say, I want that. And go, many iterations later, we end up somewhere where we're both happy, and quite a few visits to his office where I get to mess around on my own. And that was a great experience, but it definitely is very different to whiskey in the sense of where I was coming from. And in some ways, I think it resulted in a better product. One of the biggest compliments I ever had was after we launched Finest Caribbean, and we'll go back a bit into the story of the whole of Black Tot. But with Finest Caribbean, the original brief was to make a fun, relatively cheap pouring rum that we could have in bars. That was what I was asked for. Oh, and would sit well. Right, this is the overall brief. My problem is I don't really care about making cheap stuff, and I'm not that interested in how well it works in a cocktail. I just want to drink it. I'm a hardcore. I have no interest in. I make cocktails for myself for fun, but I sip whiskey and rum, right? I sip.
Yeah.
So I remember working with one of the John Lister does all cocktails for specialty brands, and I showed him every iteration I did. The guy saw everything I did, and by the end, when we bottled Finest Caribbean, it was no longer a cheap behind the bar rum. It was poured down a bottle. It sits in the shop. It's something you can sip. It's at a higher strength. It was originally going to be a 40, and I was like, no, it's 46.2 because that's what it tastes good at. And John said to me at the end, he goes, you have not made what you set up to make. You've made something that perfectly represents yourself. That's absolutely true of almost everything we do at Elixir. We end up making something that represents us. It's something we would drink. And I kind of feel in a way that's a better philosophy, at least for us. I'm much happier talking about it. If I've made something for someone else, I'd probably be pretty depressed.
Well, this was going to be, one of my questions going on, because obviously each blender, regardless of the category, has their own flavor profiles and their own palates, which they're obviously catering towards. But then you also I guess depending on the size of the company, you have other considerations, whether they're commercial considerations or consistency. If you have an existing fan base, or in probably more relevant in our case here, you have Sekinder. You also have to please, So what is that like when you're blending, not just for your own palate, but with these other considerations in mind? How much does that play a factor, and how much do you just disregard it?
I definitely play lip service to all of it very early on. Sekinder's actually easy, right? Because we have very similar palates. We drink similar stuff. We both go through phases where we drink very different stuff, but I think we would both, if there's a glass we both like, there's a reason, right? There's crossover. So that's never really an issue for me. The customer, what was the customer like? What I learned working in retail is very simple. If you believe in it, then largely the customer largely, and if they don't, essentially they were never going to buy anyway. So it's kind of irrelevant in the end. I think it's the biggest mistake is bottling something from a marketing perspective, because you get so dragged down in frankly largely bullshit that nobody cares about. If you bottle purely from what would I drink, you've got to believe there are other people who drink what you drink. There are. I mean, we've got people we drink with. Well, those people are going to drink the same stuff as you. So as long as you put that in a bottle, you're probably right. So I don't think I never really felt those challenges. The financial side, the commercial side's a bit more difficult, and we often start off and say, well, we'd like to do it for this price, and then being frank, we almost always ignore it. And the end consideration is very simple: is it worth the pounds we have to charge for it? And often we don't know that until we've finished. And I think that's quite good. It's quite freeing. We're very fortunate to have a director who thinks like that. Whiskey or rum is worth what people pay to drink it at the end of the day. And that means that you don't have that issue where you have to just use really young stuff, or you have to use stuff that doesn't suit your purpose. Yes, I certainly don't have a particularly difficult job from those people.
No, so it's good, and it's interesting here. I remember a conversation with a distiller from a very large rum company. He said that, one of the worst parts of his job was that the marketing team would come to him and say, okay, we've done our market research, we've tested 100 people, we would like you to make a rum that costs this much and is this color and is this sweetness and comes out like this. And he was like, why would I do this? Let me make you something that I love, and then you find a way to sell it, rather than the other way around. So
I mean, we're lucky as a small company. That's the we come from. One of the questions there from Aaron, how much do we put into using cocktails? The Finest Caribbean, we genuinely started with this will be needed to be used for cocktails, and I spent a long time working with someone who understood that, and I could never get it, because the problem was there's too much sacrifice for it to be really easy. And Mitch, you might disagree with me, but to be really easy to use in a cocktail, you need it to be pretty one-dimensional, pretty boring, because then you can play with all sorts of flavors, and that makes it very versatile. That's great, right? If you want to make a whole range of different drinks, you need a relatively straightforward flavor. If you go into a complex flavor, it ends up reducing the number of drinks. You can have more fun. You can probably make something better, but it's probably more difficult. And if you take Finest Caribbean as an example, something you said to me probably rings very true. It makes great drinks if you're willing to mess around with the ratio in classic, then you can make an amazing daiquiri. But if you're not willing to mess around with the ratios, and if what you want is simplicity, i.e., you're going to make a right hand, and you're going to use equal measures of everything, and that's my ratio. But you want something really simple, so it fits into that. If you want it to be sipping well as well, then this is a whole new game. You need your customer to be willing to play with it to get something amazing out of it.
I think, yeah, I mean, you touched on a really interesting thing with complexity in cocktails, and I would disagree to a certain extent, but it's an interesting one, right? When you do have, say, when you're working with a single island or a single flavor profile, even though you might have, ignoring, say, the vodkas of the world and, or those kind of equivalents, when you have a more distinct flavor profile from just one region, it is a little easier to play with. You can account for it more, but then, the very history of rum cocktails and tiki cocktails and that kind of culture is blending these rums together and putting these different flavors together. And depending on that blend, depending on that ratio, for me, that's where fun, so for those of you who haven't had it before, this is our Black Tot Finest Caribbean that we're talking about now. To me, it kind of reminds me of like a house blend that you might do with your own rums, putting it together, and it is quite bespoke, and it does have a very distinct flavor that doesn't necessarily sort of sit on the shelf of going, oh, it fits here, it fits like, and that's one of the first things I asked you when I joined Black Tot was like, what were you trying to make? What cocktail did you have in mind of this? And you were like, no.
Well, I think that's kind of my point. It depends on the level of cocktail you're looking at. Like if you're talking about someone like yourself, Mitchell, you're talking about someone who really understands the category and playing with flavor in the same way chefs play with flavor, then it's a fantastic ingredient. But if you're talking about someone who wants to buy a bottle off the shelf at home to make a daiquiri and they want a recipe on their Waitrose, this is probably not going to work for you.
It's trickier, yeah.
And you do have to always recognize that, not necessarily when you're making it. My point to Aaron is I'm not thinking, what's my Waitrose customer going to do with this in their cocktail? I'm thinking, how can I make them the best bloody drink so that they pour in a glass and they enjoy it? Because 90% of people who buy a bottle off the shelf will probably drink it straight. Probably. Most people are lazy like me, I have to put stuff together. I only do cocktails. I do cocktails for relaxation. Right? It's actually therapeutic to mix drinks. But if I want a drink, like simplicity, which is basically a glass full of liquid. Pint glasses are great. They fit a lot of liquid in. Rum.
Just a pint of daiquiri, please. Come on. That's the next session coming up tomorrow.
The other consideration we always have with Black Tot, of course, was last consignment. You said, Mitch, it's a new brand. In some ways, it's a completely new brand. We launched Black Caribbean last autumn, and that was a new project for me that took two and a half years or something. But before that, we had last consignment, and that builds up expectation. So is it going to taste like the Navy rum? And the simple answer to that was, it can't, so it won't. Cannot do this, so let's not try. So hopefully when people try it, what they'll see is it's a blend. It's a blended rum in the same way Navy rum, the original Navy rum was a blend. But it's for my perspective of today, or Sakina's perspective of today. So it's a bit drier. It's not sweet because that's our palate. I think it's largely, for want of a better term, it's on trend. People are probably drinking a bit drier now for all sorts of reasons. But as whiskey drinkers, we come from a relatively dry palate. And then my hope was that it built up layers of flavour, which I think is very, very something of today. With not just drink culture, food culture, everybody wants complexity in their food. They want to enjoy what they drink. I believe that. I do. I want layers of everything, and I hope that's what we've done with that rum.
So on that, and again, another difference between the whiskey and the rum one, probably one of the most apparent ones, which is almost taken for granted, is that in the rum world, you are not locked to one country. You're not selecting casks from one place or one region. You can blend some Jamaica with Barbados, with Guyana, with anywhere in the world. Whereas, typically, I know there are exceptions to that rule, but typically you're blending whiskies for a certain style or a certain region. How do you find that as a blender? You know, is that very freeing? Is it almost too much choice? What's the advantages and disadvantages of that?
I wouldn't say it's too much choice. The challenge, stood right at the beginning, the challenge for me is learning the diversity. Now, I would argue that in terms of certainly Scotch whisky, there's a lot, 128 distilleries, all producing different, right? So there's a lot of choice if you want it. In rum, exactly the same. You have an awful lot of choice. The extremes are bigger. I don't think because of nationality. It's so certain countries have certain traditions, but if you take Jamaica as an example, yes, there are high ester crazy rums from Jamaica like Hamden and like Worthy Park do, and there's some fantastic examples of that. Appleton, which is beautifully sweet and balanced, and so there's diversity even within one country. You don't, if you took all the rum distilleries across the world, you still don't have as many whiskey distilleries, right? So you still don't have quite that or flavour, and there's an awful lot you can do in distillation, even with whiskey or with rum, to make a different spirit. I think the thing that I do find probably more fascinating than freeing, I find fascinating is the culture, because in Scotch whisky, you have one culture, right? Although you have differences in very small, minute differences in local culture, which is very British led, right? So in the UK, we probably have the most diverse country when it comes to culture. And I realise I'm British and I should say that, but the reason I say that is if you're like me and you've got family from Yorkshire, and then you've got family from London, and you grew up in Cornwall, I can tell you they're very three diverse communities there. If you looked at it from the outside, you'd think they're all British. But if you told any of them that, I mean, if you told someone from Yorkshire they were like someone from Cornwall, they'd probably punch you in the face. In Russia, it's a big extreme because you do have international cultures with different perspectives. And there's something wonderful about that. There's something really enjoyable about playing it from a flavour point of view, but also from learning from a cultural point of view, meeting people. And the one thing that they all have in common is that they love rum. And actually, the other thing they have in common is they all love fun. I genuinely have never experienced people in one drinks category who enjoy one thing more than rum, people, and fun.
It's always a party. So, with your experience with, starting off with Finest Caribbean, which was about 2 years in the blending process, but years before discussing that as well, right?
Yeah.
And then coming on to the rum we're going to be talking about, which is our 50th anniversary. Do you find it gets easier as you go, like as your familiarity increases, or like being more familiar with those flavors? What was your experience from one rum?
So we made 50th anniversary a lot quicker, as much you well know, because you were involved in sort of 50th anniversary, than we made Finest Caribbean. There was a little bit of pressure, we had to do it quicker, and there's also scale, right? So Finest Caribbean's ongoing. There's a consistency element to that, and in some ways that drove a simplicity to the recipe, a simplicity to what we were going to do. So Finest Caribbean is made up of essentially 4 styles of rum that we continuously buy and continuously recreate. 50th anniversary in some ways harks back to the kind of Elixir portfolio of freedom from any kind of, like, there's no pressure. The stylistic dream for 50th anniversary was somewhere between myself and Seguindo, and actually the first blend I made the 50th anniversary was all about what I liked, and it was much closer to Finest Caribbean. It was kind of elegant and pretty and dry, and that's what I wanted. And I gave it to Ken, and he's like, "Yeah, it's not bulgy enough. It's got to be more, be bigger," and that's what he wanted. So I think what we've ended up is somewhere between the two. Now the other difference is when you're working on a bulk rum project, you're working with a particular style, right? So we've got 4 different styles of rum, and we put them together in these ratios. And Bob Jungle, there's your bottle. It wasn't quite that simple, but that's it. At the end of the day, the only thing was we knew it was ongoing, so it had to be right. Although, as Sekinder keeps saying, we do keep tweaking, we do keep changing small things. Black Tot 50th, we worked in casks, right? So this was specific for casks of rum. And that makes your ratio and your measuring very different. It's a very different world. And in some ways, there's a lot more choice, ups and downs. In some ways, there's a lot less choice. So they were very different projects and very different timescales. I probably enjoy 50th more.
Right.
I feel very proud of Finest Caribbean. I'm very proud of the work we put into it. I'm very proud of what we ended up with. But 50th anniversary it's my happy place. It's the proper messing around, like sitting in there and doing ups and downs by tiny percentages and seeing what happens. It's kind of Willy Wonka time, and I think that's the most fun you can be having. So in many ways, drinking 50th anniversary, and I really can't wait for it to launch. It's exactly how I wish my job was all the time. Yeah, so it's definitely how I think blending should be, but largely on a large scale is impossible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the parts of the process I got to do with you, I thoroughly enjoyed, and just like, I remember like we're trying all these cask samples and we try all these different things. And I remember some of the ideas getting thrown about and thinking, oh, it'd be great if 1 or 2 of those things happened. And then you were like, oh, here's what I came up with. And I just remember looking at this list, and I'll share it with everyone now so you can see it, and just being like, really? This is what we this was the final blend. It's like the geekiest rum blend I could imagine, and I just remember being just delighted that was where you went with it.
So we started off with a relatively simple idea in terms of styles and what we put together, but actually like the really small things, like, and we will get questions, does 0.5% make a difference? Yes, it makes a massive difference.
Absolutely. Well, I always think of it like from a cocktail point of view, that 0.5% is like the bitters in your old fashioned, right? It adds, You don't need a lot, you just need that little touch, and it completely, adds so much complexity and flavor. And especially with, for anyone, if you've ever tried, we've bottled it 40 year, but the 42-year-old is the same rum that went into this. It's super woody, it's super dense. It's, if you drink too much, you get splinters from it. It's like, but that little dash, as you say, makes such a difference to that overall blend.
Well, the first time that even came up in this blend, I put it together in various formats and we'd come up with something I liked, but I felt it was missing a bit of the, I'll say aeration because it sounds nicer than kind of musty, but there's a mustiness, there's a acidity to last consignment. It's a little bit like wooden floors. You can taste the dust off an old floorboard on it. And the Kinder had said to me, it's missing. It doesn't feel close enough to last consignment. And I agreed that it still felt fresh. And I thought, well, what if I just put some flagons in it? What would happen? So then I started perception of flagons and working out how many flagons I would put in it and how much that made a difference. And it made a difference. I could suddenly get that slight mustiness. I could get that slight wood dust. I could get that sense of being stuck in a stone flagon for 30, 40, 50 years. And that worked really well. And then when we got to the end of that process, the Kinder said to me, I just wish it was older. I wish there was that woodiness you got from old. And I suddenly remembered, I've got that 42-year-old Demerara sitting in a glass. I could use some of that. So we got that.
Just casually lying around,
Well, we got a lot of half projects that we never quite finished. So I added a bit of that, and again, it just tweaked it up enough that you go, yeah, that's old rum. That's what I expect from old rum. It's these tiny percentages, these tiny little things that you're just adding and adding and adding. And Mitch, it's your fault the label looks like that, because you said you wanted everything on it, and I just kept adding things, not thinking how much stuff would have to be written down.
And even then, we're like, I could still add some bits, but it is. I mean, this was, and thank you as well for indulging me on this. I know we went back and forth for hours over several weeks, arguing and trying to fit in all these different bits and pieces. But this for me is one of the most fascinating parts about what we're doing with Black Tot, and this. There is a huge push for transparency within the rum industry, because it is famously misleading and famously not transparent, and like hidden additives and just like colors and all different things going on in the rum world. And so for me, it was obviously important that we led with transparency, but it was also like, how can we do that on a level that no blend really does? And for me, I always remember that being a thing in rum trainings, and hearing people talk about blends like, oh, we can't tell you our blend ratio, we can't tell you this. And I don't know, I just always found that a bit ridiculous, because every cask is different, every recipe is different, and to be able to share that with people is for me the exciting part about it, because that's what, for me, in a blend allows us to show this is the influence that each country is having. This is the influence that each distillery and each cask and each different flavor profile is having on the blend, rather than it just being, it's a secret.
Yeah, but you've also got to have, there's two aspects. There's obviously we tell everyone a very rough percentage of what goes into finest Caribbean. Percentages just because they might go up and down. Simple. But if we told everyone exactly what we did every time and it was copyable and someone might copy it, that'd be very annoying. There's also the fact that someone out there will always tell you should have done this, right? And that's frankly frustrating. What you have to have is enough faith that you did the right thing.
But it's the rum world, Ollie. They'll tell you should have done that anyway.
What it comes down to is I'm an arrogant bastard, and I believe I did the right thing, and they can fuck off. As long as the majority of people try it and drink it and go, you know what, that tastes great, I'm really happy. If they want more information, then we'll try and give it to them. We've always had that kind of philosophy with whiskey. We will try and give you as much as we can get. The one thing I would say in rum, actually true in whiskey too, information people want, that I think largely comes from marketing. It comes from marketing delivering information, some of which is not true. And people expect that information when it's not even deliverable. So a good example is colour, right? You say, does it contain colouring? Okay, define it. Does it contain colouring to the end of finest Caribbean or this? No, I didn't use chemical colouring in anything. I never used, to the best knowledge, no whiskey or rum product that I have ever been involved in has had E150 in it. However, one of the most shocking things in my entire experience of rum was thinking it was great, wanting to use it, and then discovering it had mountains of, we'll call it natural colouring. So basically just Demerara molasses dumped in it to wrap the casks and make it darker. And that's a thing. That happens at the distillery. Nothing to do with us, nothing to do with anyone else. That's just how they do it. And now you've got people who've got colouring in it. And I'm like, well, we ended up, so we sent it off to chemical analysis. They're like, no, it's got no colouring in it. It's probably got a butt ton of molasses in it. So you end up in this really weird world where everybody wants honesty, they want transparency. You tell them, at the end of the day, as long as it tastes good and they still buy it, I'm happy. But it's such a confused area, mainly because some marketers use acid to sell their bottles. And we live in a world, we come from a world and we live in a world the flavor is the most important thing. What it drinks like is the most important thing. Everything else is somewhat irrelevant. I used to use the example of whiskey all the time. Now, and I'll stress again, we don't use colouring. But for every person who ever came up to me and said, I don't like whiskey with colouring in it, I'd be like, yeah, do you drink like a London 16? They'd be like, oh, it's great whiskey. They're great. It's got colouring in it. Non-chilled. It's chilled. I mean, it's every tick box that every geek hates, but it's a great product. That's probably true in rum too. I mean, I used to love Eldorado 15. Definitely got colouring in it, and it's sugar added to it. And it's a good rum. It's a great rum. It's a great drink. It's to be enjoyed. It's a really tricky area when into those conversations, as you know, because you have them more than I do.
Yeah, it's an ongoing daily discussion, but yeah, but it's true. You know, there's all these. I think we're seeing now the rum world, you know, really sort of start to flex how far it can push transparency and how much it can get away with on the labels. And you know, there has been such a divide where for years people have pushed for it, and now producers, you know, and I kind of feel like, you know, our label here is one of them. We're sort of going, okay, right, let's give you everything we can. But how does that compare to the whiskey world? Like, could you even put this much information on the label if this was whiskey? Could you do anything like this? Or
so there's lots of things in terms of Scotch whiskey now. I couldn't put all the different ages. I get done for that. So Scotch whiskey is very heavily regulated, and the regulations aren't actually give transparency to some elements that people want as Compass Box fought hard to be able to give them. And as I was saying, there's some very good reasons for that, because there's two aspects. I don't ever want this rum to be seen as us saying it's a 42-year-old rum. I don't want that. I want it very clear. There's a lot of younger rums in this.
Yeah,
it tastes good because it tastes good, nothing else. And Scotch whiskey as a category, paranoid with people saying this is a 40-year-old Scotch whiskey, 5% 40-year-old. So that's understandable. However, it doesn't allow for this kind of label where you're trying to tell everyone everything. So they take a blanket approach, which, given the scale, and rum will face that as an issue. You know, how do you regulate a category as vast as this without going down to the most basic? And then how is that helpful to customers? The answer is it's not helpful to geeky customers. It's helpful to the public, maybe. But when it comes to education, it's a lot of hard work. And so it's a really difficult balance. We've decided with rum, because we can write everything, we will write everything. And then we will go to the effort to explain it to them. So I think Brian's asked a question, how do we want 50th anniversary present to customers? It's very simple. I hope that everybody who sells our product, every retailer who sells it, gets to try it and gets to talk about how it tastes. And when they show the back label, it's more of, these are all the things it takes to make this. But not, I don't ever want anyone saying, well, it's got 42-year-old rum in it, or it's got maybe stock in it. Those are just component parts. And everyone's asked for transparency, so we've given it. And that's a nice thing to do, but I don't want it to be used to sell to someone who doesn't understand rum. I want people to buy it who don't understand rum because it tastes really good. What else do I have?
Yeah. We need to have the whole conversation, and yeah, that's it. Hopefully with the whole layout there, you get a good idea.
Just to depress you, Brian, because I know you work for Impex, it means that you've got to go and drink with as many people as possible. As hard work as that will be.
It's a tough call out there. But yes, please, as we carry on as well, if you have any questions, please put them down in the comments. We'll try and get to all of them in the next few minutes when we're going through everything. So looking at how this blend was put together, and as you said, it happened quite quickly. What was what were some of the extra challenges you faced this year? Because I don't know if anyone's noticed, but there's been this like global pandemic thing happening in the background. And I imagine that would make putting a blend together maybe harder than normal. So what were the sort of challenges you faced this year with it?
It's definitely at this moment. So we actually did the sampling back in January, was it? Before, as coronavirus was kicking off in Asia, but not really hit Europe, which meant we got to drive up the road and do all the cask sampling around warehouses, and that was all a lot of fun. And normally in a project like this, I'd also go to the bottling hall when it was all being vatted to check on things. That was always the plan. Once coronavirus happened, obviously we weren't allowed to travel. We said we couldn't go to the bottling hall, so we couldn't do any of that. There were lots of issues to do with packaging and all of that, that's the main reason it's run so late, is because we're still waiting on boxes even today. Because
it's like the world's only box at the moment, right? This is
it's closed and all of that. But actually, the biggest liquid challenge was an error that happened. And it's an understandable error. We're dealing with a relatively very complex blend in a category that our bottling hall were not used to working in. And to be completely open, what happened was I designated a blend that I liked, I thought was very good. We sent the casks off to the bottling hall, but it involved using half casks of things. And I also bought extra, because I'm a great believer, that proper bit of Yorkshire in me. You buy it a bit cheaper now, keep it for a bit longer, buy as much as you can, low price, happy. So I bought a little bit extra, a few things, and accidentally during the blending process, they dumped Jamaican, which was Hamden. It says it on the back of the box. We're very lucky we can say that it's Hamden, because Hamden said it was okay for us to name it, because very nicely and they respect us, which is very grateful for. But Christelle and Luca both said that you guys will do a good job, so it's okay. So we had these casks in hand and they put too much in, and then I got the first sample back, which I was very excited to get, and I put it in a glass. I was like, something's not right. This is not right. And I ended up going through the whole recipe and then getting Warren going, this is not good. So I had to take that sample and rework it with extra stock, and we ended up with, give or take, about a third extra rum in the end by adjusting the recipe to make it work, which meant using a lot more expensive stuff and the rest. And then we hit the challenge of, okay, well, we've already briefed in do around 5 bottles. We've already briefed in how much we're producing, so we've only got this much packaging. So I had the great fortune to be able to say that, you know what we'll do? We'll make our own Solera system. No, it's not Solera system, it's still not kill me, but we're going to make our own system. So we've actually racked up the remainder blend. So we're going to bottle 5,000 bottles. We've bottled 5,000 bottles, and we've taken the rest of the stock, which is put it back in old refill sherry, so they give it vast amounts of flavour. And we have left that, and in about a month's time, I take some samples from it and start reblending that with some more stock next year, and we will do exactly the same. So we are trying to recreate the idea of a third full vat of rum into and create new stuff. So however comes a solution, a wonderful solution.
Yeah. So this for me is my favorite part about the 50th anniversary rum. Isn't even this year. It's what it's going to become year on year, and this ever evolving blend, which is, the more. When I started, one of the things we were doing was so much research into the background of it and how the original Navy rum came about, and the reason why Last Consignment tasted the way it did was because of this ever evolving blend that was continuously topped up for over 100 years. And I remember one of our early conversations. Ollie was like, "Can we have some big blending vats that we just continuously top up?" You were like, "One day, maybe." like a dad telling his kid, like, no, one day. Like, and then I just remember the phone call where you're like, I've got some bad news and some good news. Like, the bad news is they've dumped all of this Hampton into the rum. And I'm like, why is that bad news? And then you're like, but the good news is we've got this extra third and we're going to start this Black Tot blend. I was like, yes, amazing. So it was all the Christmases come early, which is very exciting for me and probably like 12 rum nerds. Chris, who's in the comments, is one of them. So what's Chris saying? I know you just released this, but with the idea of the ever-evolving blend from year to year, have you already started thinking about changes or directions you would like to take this in future years? So this is one of my questions. Are we throwing some Australia in there? Are we going to do some Cuba and Martinique? What are we? I guess not Cuba, because then we won't be able to sell it in America, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, so when we came up with the 50th anniversary, the only thing I knew that I wanted to include was I basically said I want to include the 4 pillars of native rum. Right? I had this thing in my head that although obviously history is an ever-changing beast, as we heard from Mr. Dietrich, native rum, by some accounts, came out of Jamaica originally, so Jamaica plays a part, but is obviously taken out of the rum blend in later on. And then the other core island and rum producing nations, if you like, are Guyana, which plays a massive part in native rum, Barbados, and Trinidad. And when we did Finest Caribbean, I concentrated on Barbados, Jamaica, and Guyana, partly because I felt they would give us the best balance, but also because of the history and the nature of that, and I like that. So I always do with 50th anniversary, I wanted to include all 4 kind of pillars. I also had Coroni, so if to mess around with Coroni, why wouldn't you? It's a great component to play with.
It's historically accurate.
Yeah. That's why we did it. So that was for 50th anniversary. That was quite important. In terms of next year's Navy Strength, which is what it will be, we're going to do it at Navy Strength every year. No, I don't know. I'm probably going to do in the end is look at a mixture of the stock we're holding, the stock we can buy, and take it from a liquid perspective. I think one of the powers of independent bottlers, of independent companies like us, is that you don't have to be marketing led. You can be liquid led. We do now have a marketing department, but they're not allowed to get involved in liquid production, much to their frustration. I was recently asked, "Want to brief on a project?" And I said, "No, that's not how it works. I make liquid. You figure out how we're going to sell the damn thing. That's what we do here. We don't do it the other way around." I think one of the powers of that is that we can look at this purely what will drink well. So will we use I have got some amazing casks of Australian rum, as I think you know, Mitch, as we tried them together, and they stand up on their own. Will they work in a blend? I don't know. We'll just visit around and see, have a bit of fun. I also need to look at where this blend is sitting in, having been in wood for 6 months, which doesn't sound like a long time, but there's a lot of active compounds in this, and I've got no idea what's going to happen with that. Maturation in wood or resting in wood, even for 6 months, with the oxygen levels, is a world apart from resting in glass. So the bottle is going to taste very different to what's in wood. So until we've done those, looked at those things, we're not going to know exactly where we're going to want to go, but we will sit down between myself, Ginder, and yourself, and a few other people that are involved in those conversations. We'll say, okay, what could we do, what would we like to do, and what should we do? And somewhere between those 3 things is what we'll end up with. It won't be everything, but it'll be little bits and pieces put together. The only thing I'll guarantee is we've never, as a company, ever put anything in a bottle that we wouldn't drink copious amounts of regularly for a straw. I've been involved in projects where it's gone wrong and we haven't sold it. and like quite serious quantities. It's got quite serious money whiskey, and we're very lucky as a business to be in that position to be able to say, no, I'm just not going to do it. And we would have done that with 50th. If the Hamden had been dumped and they changed it, we wouldn't have sold it. We just would have said, sorry, end of, dump it in the sea, move on. I was very fortunate I could go back and buy casks of other stuff. But genuinely, we had that conversation. Do we just stop the project? And the fact that we could, not just my personal opinion, make it better. So that was great. I was very lucky for that.
It's nice evolution. And on that as well, that I guess that's an interesting choice to make, and almost like a risk to take as the blender, to take that blend that we have for the 50th anniversary and put the extra into sherry butts rather than just putting it in, say, stainless or a container that's inert. What was your choice to do that, and to play with something that you know what it tastes like, and to have it develop in those 6 months that way?
So the thing to bear in mind, I've used refill butts. So I've not used first fill. They're not massively active bits of wood. In an ideal world, we would put them into wooden vats, because wooden vats would allow oxygen, and oxygen is a wonderful thing for creating interesting flavour. I'm a great believer that oxygen plays a massive part in maturation. So we knew we needed it in wood, because I wanted that. One of the things I like last consignment is that, as I said, that slight kind of earthiness, that dusty floorboard. We call it whisky, we call it OBE. You get it on old bottles that have relatively low fills. You start getting this slightly kind of note, and I love it. I think it's wonderful, and I want to create it. To be able to do that, you need oxygen. So we knew we had to put it to wood. Sherry butts are a simple choice, because with the much larger volume, you get less wood interaction. And so if you use a much smaller cask, you get much more wood interaction in a shorter space of time. Well, I don't want lots of wood. I'm not looking to make it woody. I'm not looking to add lots of tannins or vanillins. What I'm looking to do is keep the character, the overall character, the same, while allowing the oxygen to play a part in compounds. And if it does add a little bit of richness from, if one of the casks is a little bit more active, I don't think that's going to hurt it by any stretch. Unlike last consignment, so unlike the lady, I'm not looking to make the same blend next year. I'm not looking to make 50th anniversary taste the same. That's not my vision. We're much luckier than that. We're a little independent spirits business. I'm looking to make something new, something completely different. So we've got something fun to talk about. I mean, we've got to keep you busy, Mitch. So if I just gave you the same blend, you'd have the same talk every day. God, that'd be boring, isn't it? I mean, stand by the stand for 8 years in the same thing. You try yourself the same. So if I make something that tastes different each year, it's more interesting for you, it's more interesting for our customers, and frankly, it's more fun for me. I've got something that tastes the same or largely the same in Finest Caribbean. That's where my consistency will be.
Yeah.
That's where we will try to develop that into a consistently very good rum. But with the kind of Navy Strength Edition, it's where we get to play a little bit more and have a bit more fun.
Yeah, it's very exciting. But for something that's essentially a limited release or a limited edition, it's kind of this ongoing backbone, this ongoing evolution of it is fast becoming, I think, the thing that everyone's talking about and everyone's getting very excited about. I'm going to refill again because it's very, very good. And we should probably talk about the rum itself, actually, and just tease out what's going on in here. I think what surprised me most about this was trying it next to Last Consignment, as I've said, and there's been a couple of people who have been lucky enough to be with me whilst I've had the samples going. And, it is very different, but it's got one of the things someone was saying last night was how rounded it feels. Like this feels so much more, I don't know, together. It feels complete. Like Last Consignment has tons of depth, but this just feels a beautifully put together piece of rum. So
I think Well, I hope, because we worked quite hard in putting this together. And there's no disrespect to Last Consignment. Last Consignment is in some ways the ultimate romantic story. It's not intentional blending; it's unintentional genius. Right? There's unintentional wonderful rum. Right? There's no one paid at the Navy to taste rum. I'm sure it tasted this way. It was largely tweaked and changed in massive quantity to what the sailors' reactions were, but it's not like, oh, we want this specific. So you've got to remember we're working on a really small scale of like 20 cars at a time. And that's the equivalent from doing, school dinners to going to a restaurant. That's basically the difference we're in. Now, I'm basically sitting there with knowing that I'm going to do a 7-course menu for 10 people tonight. I know what ingredients I need, and I know I can put it together in this way, and I know that. What they're trying to do is school the kids who need booze now, and they need a lot of it. And then
it's a very interesting school you're talking about here. Don't know where you sent your son.
And the way to think of it is that they then took this school dinner of maybe quite good, it's probably a good rum, it's probably quite enjoyable, and they stuck it into stone flagons for 40 years, and it did all sorts of wonderful things in those flagons. It changed in a way no one knew it would change. None of that's intentional. It's not planned. We planned this. We tried to do this. This is an attempt at something. I hope that people believe when they try it, it is complete. It's integrated. That the slight tannic nature from the older rums and that slight dustiness gives you a background. It gives you it gives you support structure for other things. That the Hamden, and we specifically ended up using Hamden. We looked at Worthy Park at the start. I don't know if you remember that. It's the first samples we got were Worthy Park. We went Hamden. We asked for Hamden, and then I had to go and ask Hamden if I could use it because I wanted fruit, and there was a fruit in Hamden, and so Hamden makes it. We wanted that. We wanted that slight banana estery thing that we could only find there. These were all intentional things we put together to build something. That does not make it better than Last Consignment, but that when people are trying it, they're trying something someone's to make. As find it the Last Consignment when they're trying something that is accidental wonderfulness. In many ways, there's part of me that enjoys Last Consignment more for that. And this feels like I've worked on it. It feels like we as a team worked towards something. There's great pride and great pleasure in that. But there's, as someone who loves old whiskey, there's something really special about the accidental miracle. I mean, it's just
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I think the thing I'm proudest of that we're building with this 50th anniversary blend and with the yearly Navy strength release is sort of going in some ways of not just paying lip service to it being a Navy rum or a nod to tradition, but we're actually bringing back this idea of continuously evolving the blend and taking it out. I think what I'm most excited for is in like 5 years' time, when we're on the fifth of these releases and seeing the rum nerds who have like noted down all of the tables from each rum, and you have to have each bottle to be able to work out what was in the last one. And then like, and Chris, if you're still watching, you're definitely going to be this guy who's like, I've worked out the exact percentages of bottle number 5 based on the last 5 years.
What I would tell anyone who thinks they're doing that, as someone who asked Carson last year to do that, as I did, right? I took every single recipe he gave me and I put it together in a different ratio and then asked him to figure it out. What he told me is, this is a nightmare. This is not how to do this. This is very hard work. And in reality,
saying 100%, he's already plotting the graph, I can tell.
What I could also tell you is if you then put it all back together again, it wouldn't taste the same. And that's where the slight accidental wonderfulness of Last Consignment will hopefully come into this, because it won't be recreatable. None of them will be recreatable in the same way, and that's brilliant. It makes me happy.
And that for me is the magic of it, and the beauty of having this transparency on the labels, because even if you tell someone exactly what it is, and even if you say, they go out and they try and copy it, it just never tastes the same. It's like, no matter how much you copy Gordon Ramsay cooking something and you go, oh, here it is. It's like, no, it's going to taste different. It's always going to taste different. Like, because you will always add a bit more, or a bit less, or something will happen, or a different cask will add a different influence to it. So it's, I think it's really cool. I can't wait for everyone to be able to try this rum, because I think it's absolutely delicious. And also I'm very excited that it's our 4th release as Black Tot rum. And it's the first time we've actually hit full Navy strength. So we're finally at 54.5. We finally made it.
I don't want to ruin it for you, but they're actually in the back. It was 54.7. So
54.7.
Yeah, because actually on the label we're allowed to go 0.2 below. So for safety's sake, 2 above you.
Everyone, you get a free 0.2% on us. It's free. We throw that in there. No, we're allowing for aeration. But I've seen your tasting notes on this, Ollie, as well, and you start talking about vanilla lattes and some very. I didn't believe it was you who wrote those tasting notes on it.
I definitely wouldn't have written vanilla latte. Definitely would have vanilla coffee, milky coffee. Milky coffee. Do I get milky coffee? It's all about not something I particularly drink vast amounts of, mine, unless I'm very ill. I think the overarching thing for me is that balance between your almost mushroomy, umami, which I love.
Yeah,
it makes me more to drink more of this because of that. But there is a bit of sweetness to it, a bit of creamy body to it as well. So.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, it is. It's so moreish, it's so delicious, and it's just it's just a real pleasure to drink. And so for anyone who's looking out for it, it's not out yet. It's coming out soon. It'll be beginning of November. We're expecting it to be out in the wild.
In terms of in the UK, maybe a little bit before that, but we also have some packs coming out, some tasting packs with it in. Progression of Finest Caribbean. You can also see 50th anniversary if you want a first chance to try. And I think the idea, Mitch, is that you're going to be doing tasting after tasting after. You've got to keep you busy, basically.
I'll just be on 24/7, just online, just just here to entertain you all. But yeah, we'll be coming out soon. And this was vatted. This was married on Black Tot Day. Is that correct?
Yeah, ironically. So wanting to launch on Black Tot Day due to the slight vatting issue, I remember getting the note that it had been vatted. I thought, at least it was Black Tot Day. They went into that, and that was. And part of the problem we had was because you've got so many complex characters and chemical compounds coming together, you do need to give it time. So we needed a mixture of vat time and bottle time as well. One of the things you miss a lot in terms of whiskey production, rum production, that people really think about is bottle. So when you bottle, especially with lots of compounds, especially like this with so many different competing flavors, you get what's called bottle shock. Sometimes to me that can end up giving you a flavor almost like plasticine. And ideally, what you want is in bottle before you give it to soul. Luckily for us, the boxes still aren't ready, so it's actually more than that in bottle. Happily sitting there waiting for the boxes.
So by the time it comes out, it'll be in the bottle for about 3 months. So everyone go and buy it, and then don't open it for another 3 months.
There's another side to this, because in an ideal world, I would give it a year, but obviously I'm not allowed to do that. So.
Okay, so buy it, and when the next one comes out next year, you can open this one, maybe.
What you do is you do what I do with sherry. So if anyone's a sherry fan, or even not, if you're not a sherry fan, become one. Right? You buy next year, you buy a bottle of Tia Pepe, which is unfiltered Tia Pepe. Just a beautiful, wonderful thing. and then start keeping them because they change every year. And actually, whiskey and rum are exactly the same. They change in the bottle, not vast amounts, but they change a little bit. So, keep one, leave it, come back.
It's like if you get a really old bottle of chartreuse, it's just amazing. Just changes so much year on year. It's brilliant. But yes, well, thank you very much for making this, because this is, I think this might very well be my new favorite rum, and certainly the one I'm going to be trying to justify taking lots of bottles for tastings out of. In terms of other exciting things for the future, I know obviously we have the Isla Distillery opening soon. So when do we start distilling the rum there?
You laugh. That is actually in my plans.
Amazing. All right.
There are molasses tanks spec for that. Why not? Island rum. That's the thing, right? All rum's made on island. It doesn't have to be in the Caribbean.
The least tropical island.
I'll have you know, there are palm trees on Jura. Okay, we are a beach, my friend. You have no idea. It's beautiful. There's all sorts of stuff coming out. Obviously, if you've got time, anyone while you're at the Whisky Show, pop over and see some of the whiskey stuff we're doing. Rum-wise, we have a really big project on that I won't speak about too much because it's probably at least a year away. In the end, we have some really good fun stuff to do with rum now. We've started, we're just not going to stop. We're doing some other things with bourbon and with cognac and all the spirits that we've been stashing and keeping and having fun with will be released in the next kind of year and a half. So yeah, busy. And of course, we're still doing single cask whiskey. We do hundreds of casks of single cask whiskey every year, so there's a lot of that coming out. And Black Tot, I'm sure it will not finish at Navy strength. There'll be something else that we want to blend and have fun with as well.
Little 63% number maybe, and
I mean, I've got a rum that I'm not going to talk too much about that I'm making specifically for you, Mitch. So that's for next year. So
I'm very excited about all of this. To finish then, Lorcan asked a lovely question, which I think is a nice one to finish on. In what perfect scenario would we both love to drink this drop? Where would you be right now, Ollie? If
do you know what? I'd be with people.
In real life, we'd be anywhere with real life people. It'd be amazing.
Funny, I would tell you I'd be in the Caribbean. I've never actually been. It's still one of my things I've got to do. I was supposed to go this year, but obviously coronavirus is going to skip it that bit.
Barbados is still open. We can go right now.
Apparently, get a visa and work.
Yeah, we just relocate for 12 months. We're fine.
I think thinking about the flavors and the way it's put together and everything else about it, the thing I've missed this year more than anything is actually sitting in a bar or a pub with people. And it's funny because it's Whisky Show, obviously virtual Whisky Show. With me, I've done it every year. I've been at Whisky Show every year it's existed. It is my one weekend a year together with all my friends that I don't get to see the rest of the time. Customers or distillers or brand ambassadors. There's certain people I'm really missing. That have been missing all year, such as Ian Logan from Shivers and David Fitt from English Whiskey. These are the guys I would drink with every year. And I think if you ask me why I would drink this in a perfect occasion, it would be with you, Mitch, to introduce you to some of my whiskey pals who would desperately try and change your mind.
Come to the dark side.
but we probably pour them to try and convert them to rum. And what you discover quite quickly is it's a very, very dangerous world. We live in full of dangerous people. And I think that would be it for me. There's a pub opposite Old Billingsgate, which Lorcan will know very well. It's not the best in the world, probably a pretty terrible pub to be completely honest, but it's tradition. That's where you go for your last drink, and I think that's where I'd be. Or I'd be in I'd be there drinking this. That would make me happy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'd probably just be at trailer, you know,
Oh, you were last weekend.
which I try to be most weeks if I can. But yeah, definitely with a lot more people in the room from around the world. I just saw Matt Petrix just joined us as well. Hello, Matt. So if you missed this session or you just prefer to read, go and see Matt's website, Cocktail Wonk. He's written so much amazing stuff about Navy rum and hopefully has a book coming out soon. I'm still waiting. But yeah, he's definitely one of the people that we'd.
Matt, I imagine it's the same as us. It's packaging, right? It's been the book back. I get it. I mean, I just anytime you want to compare notes on stuff running behind, I'm with you.
No, it's wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you, Ollie, so much for creating this beautiful rum. It's such a wonderful addition to the rum world and to the Black Tot brand. We're going to wrap up because in a few minutes, I'm going to be joining Dawn on the main stage where we're going to talk rum and whiskey together. And I'm not going to talk really much about whiskey at all, but we're going to try and merge the two worlds together, which I'm sure will be a fun time. And if I don't leave soon, Dawn will kill me. So
I'm going to go and do Elixir Distillers whiskey tasting in sessions. So if anyone wants to drink whiskey, come join me.
You can avoid all the rum. So no. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you very soon. Cheers. Okay. Thanks, Ollie.